I saw you guys such pretty hard there.
Yeah.
A golf course.
Yeah.
Do you miss your house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you say water limit there. Because it like one of my friends like.
Okay, guys, page 38. I think as I was going through this, it seems like some of us were still kind of had some questions about how to find that quadrant. So I want to continue going through that, see if we can nail that down so that we are comfortable with this type of problem. So look at 15 here. 15 says find secant and cosecant if tangent is -4/3 and cosine is less than 0. So let me put some side notes here. Tangent is negative, so I'm going to put that here. I'll just put a negative just as of information gathering. And then cosine is negative. Okay. And then I'll put this ASTC. And the question that I was asking yesterday was, which quadrant must it be if tangent is negative and cosine is negative? But I think it feels confusing because maybe there's too many things going on. So why don't we do things one at a time? Let's look at tangent. So where is tangent going to be negative? Which quadrants? So A means all is positive, S means only sine is positive, T means only tangent is positive, and C means only cosine is positive. So let's just look at tangent, just tangent. Where is tangent going to be negative? Which quadrants? 2 and 4, right? It can't be 1 and 3 because 1 is all positive and 3 is tangent positive. So now we're down to 2 and 4, right? So now let's look at cosine. Where is cosine going to be negative between second and fourth quadrant? Second, right? Because cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant, so we can eliminate that, and we can narrow it down to second quadrant. So if you look at it one information at a time and then eliminate as you go, maybe that's a little bit easier to process. So then once we have quadrant 2, we're going to draw our triangle. Tangent is -4/3, so we're going to go draw your triangle in the second quadrant. Opposite over adjacent, but we're going to go left 3 and up 4, so the 3 is going to be negative and the 4 is positive. Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Your hypotenuse is always positive. And now we can do secant. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent, and cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Any questions with 15? Okay, 16. Find cosecant and cosine if secant is 17/8. Now, secant is positive, we see that, but what's related to secant? Cosine. So maybe it's easier to just put that side note, do cosine positive. And then sine is negative, so I'll put sine negative, and I'll create my chart ASTC. I'll do one property at a time, and I'll eliminate the wrong quadrants as I go. So where is cosine going to be positive? First and fourth. So these are still possibilities. We know it can't be second and third, so let's go ahead and remove them. And so now we're down to quadrants 1 and 4. Now, between 1 and 4, where is sine going to be negative? Cosine. So fourth quadrant, right? So we can eliminate the first option, and we know that sine must be negative in the fourth quadrant. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to draw our triangle. Our triangle is going to be in the fourth quadrant. Make sure that every triangle that you draw, that at least one side is touching or on the x-axis. Secant. is hypotenuse over adjacent. So hypotenuse over adjacent. Pythagorean theorem. On the quiz, it'll be smaller numbers, easier to find, but b equals 15. But what adjustment do we have to make with that 15? Make it negative, right? Because I'm going right 8 and down 15. So now we can find cosecant. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Yes.
Why would the 15 only be negative? And then like, you always just leave the hypotenuse the same?
That's right. Hypotenuse is always positive. And then the reason why 15 is negative is because imagine I want to get to this point in the fourth quadrant. I got to go right and down. So right is positive and then y is negative. Okay, cosine of theta, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. It's just going to be the reciprocal of secant, so we can just take those two numbers, flip them. So try 17 and 18. Okay, sine is negative. We know that is sine is negative in the first and third quadrants. Sorry, sine is negative in the third and fourth quadrant, right? This is positive, sine is positive, so sine is only going to be negative in the third and fourth quadrant. And then moving on to tangent, tangent is only going to be negative between the third and fourth. Can't be third quadrant because tangent is positive here, so it has to be the fourth quadrant. Okay, create your triangle in the fourth quadrant. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. We know the -1 is going to go with the y because your hypotenuse is always positive. Pythagorean theorem. (16 minus 1 is 15, so we take the square root of that. Sorry, 18. So if they don't give you one of the three main trig functions, then find the related trig function and assign either a positive or negative for that trig function. We know cotangent is related to tangent. That way you can get that letter to show up. Secant is related to cosine, so write cosine, get that letter to show up. So starting with tangents, it doesn't matter which one you start. It's just if we start with 1, we can eliminate down to 2, and then use the second one to eliminate down to 1. So tangent is positive in the first and third quadrant, so we know those are our possibilities, which means we can eliminate 2 and 4. And then between 1 and 3, we want to decide where is cosine negative. Can't be first quadrant because everything is positive, so it has to be third quadrant. Cotangent is adjacent over opposite. Now, what adjustment do we have to make with these numbers? They're both negative, right? In the third quadrant, I'm going left 3 and down 7 to get to this point. So even though it's not showing up in my ratio, it's because the 2 negatives that were there got canceled out. So now we got to bring it back in. Pythagorean theorem. Opposite over hypotenuse. Rationalize the denominator. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse. Rationalize the denominator. Okay, everybody good with page 38? Okay, let's go to page 40. Bring out your unit circle so that we can kind of use it to help us find each of these here. So page 39. Let's just go down. Let's just do the odds so that we kind of just see a little of each, and then we go to the quiz review. Okay. Evaluate without a calculator, but let's just go ahead and use the unit circle that we have. Let's see. Which quadrant are we in between pi over 2 and pi? Second quadrant. Okay, so I know I'm looking at the second quadrant. And in the second quadrant, where is sine going to be root 3 over 2? Yeah, y value, right? Y value positive. So my restrictions are given in terms of radians, so we want to provide our answer in terms of radians as well. Sure. Okay. So it says between pi over 2 and pi. So we know that's in the second quadrant. And now I'm looking for what angle measure will allow the ratio to be root 3 over 2. So basically, this is when y is root 3 over 2. So we look for y equals root 3 over 2. And that's going to be here. So we know the angle measure must be 2 pi over 2.
I didn't know it's y equals root 3 over 2.
Because we're talking about sine, right? Cosine is the x, sine is the y, right? Yeah. So reminder here, cosine of theta is the x, sine of theta is your y value. Okay, number 3. Tangent of x is equal to root 3. Okay, let's figure out first, though, which quadrant are we in between pi and 3 pi over 2? Quadrant.
Third quadrant.
Third quadrant. Okay, so quadrant 3. Now, tangent we know is y over x, right? So if we look at all these options here, y over x, y over x, y over x. Which one of these will produce root 3? I'm sorry, y over x, y over x, y over x, y over x. 4 pi over 3, right? Because if I cover up the 2's here, I get negative root 3 over negative 1, which reduces to be positive root 3. So we know that the angle that this ratio occurs is at 4 pi over 3. So we're kind of going backwards a little bit. We know we're given the ratio and we're trying to work backwards to figure out what the measure, what the radian or the degree measure is. Yes.
How do you figure out it was?
Okay. It says x is between pi and 3 pi over 2. So pi is here, 3 pi over 2 is here, so we know between pi and 3 pi over 2 is the third one. Okay, any other questions? Okay, number 5. Cosecant is -2. This looks a little confusing here. Between negative pi and negative pi over 2. Remember, we can always add pi to figure out where this is. So negative pi plus 2 pi is really pi. Negative pi over 2 plus 2 pi is 3 pi over 2. So if we don't recognize an interval, we can always add 2 pi to make it easier to recognize. So now it's easier, right? What's between pi and 3 pi over 2? Pi over 3. Okay, cosecant is related to the what? Sine, which is the y value. So which of these y values, if I flip it, will give me a -2? 7 pi over 6, right? So I say x equals 7 pi over 6. Now, that's where the location is, but what's a little bit off about 7 pi over 6? It says x is between negative pi and negative pi over 2. So we have to make an adjustment to get this to land between these two values. So what can I do to make this land?
Subtract 1, 2 pi.
Subtract 2 pi. Yeah.
How you find that 7 pi over 6?
Yep, sure. So we know it's in the third quadrant because between pi and 3 pi over 2. Cosecant is related to the what?
Sine.
Sine. And sine is the in terms of our order pairs.
On the y value.
The y value. So we're looking for the y values here. Which of these y values, if I flip it, will give me the best chance of getting to a -2?
7 pi over 6.
Because if I flip the 2 over root 2 through 2, that's not going to give me anything close to. But if I get that -1/2 to flip, -1/2 will flip to -2 over 1, and that's the match. So if I subtract 2 pi, that's same thing as 7 pi over 6 minus 12 pi over 6, which is negative. Okay, number 7. Yes.
So you're subtracting 2 pi. You added 2 pi at the beginning.
Yeah, I added 2 pi in the beginning just so that I can figure out where I am, because it's harder to know where I am right now. But then once I solve for x, I got to put it back in the proper interval because 7 pi over 6 is not a value between negative pi and negative pi over 2. So to get it to land back to where it was coming from, I got to subtract 2 pi. But I want a value that's this region. Okay, so 7, 9, and 11, it says give 2 solutions. So we want to look all over our unit circle. And we know sine, it says, where is sine going to be -1/2? We know sine is a y value, right? So just look through all your unit circles. Where are you going to see -1/2 for your y value? Yeah, 2 places, right? Yeah, 210 and 330, right? Those are the places where I'm going to get at y of -1/2. And I want to leave it in degrees because it's it's given as in terms of degrees. Number 9. tangent is equal to 0. The formula for tangent is y over x. So you know that zeros is only going to occur along the quadrants, right? Along one of the quadrant order pairs. So look at all the order pairs, y over x, y over x, y over x, y over x. Which one of them will produce a tangent equal to 0? Well, see, the problem with 9270 is because if I do y over x, I get 1 over 0. And 1 over 0 is considered what? Undefined. So that's not quite the same thing as 0. Yeah, I want 0 over -1, or I want 0 over 1. So here, I can say 0, 180, and I can even include 360. It's there's only 2 solutions, so 2 of those 3 will work. Question?
Okay.
Okay, sure. I'll go over that again. So tangent equal to 0. So the only time I'm going to get anything with zeros is along the quadrants, right? There's no other order pair that will give me anything close to 0. Okay, so I know it's going to be one of the 4 quadrants. Now, what's the formula for tangent? Tangent is y over x. So let's look at all the y over x's. 1 over 0, that doesn't make sense. So that's not 0. How about 0 over 1? That is 0, right? So that's a possibility. So I can either do 0 or 360. How about 0 over -1? That works too, so 180. But I can't do 270 because -1 over 0 is not 0, so I eliminate that. So just 0, 180, or 360.
So if a number gets divided by 0, it's undefined.
That's right. If the number gets divided by 0, it's undefined. But if 0 is divided by a non-zero, then it's 0. All right. Cosecant is undefined. So again, the only time you're going to get undefined is along the axis. You're not going to get undefined in each of the quadrants. So cosecant is related to the what? The sine, right? Which is the y value. So let's look at the y value. Where is the y value going to be undefined if I flip it, right? Is it going to be along the x-axis, or is it going to be along the y-axis? So let's look at the y-axis here. The y-axis, I have 1, right? What happens if I flip 1? Still 1, right? 1 is 1 over 1. If I flip 1, it's still 1. So I know that these are okay. These are not going to produce undefined for the y value. Now, what if I go over to the x-axis? If the sine is 0, if the y value is 0, cosecant is flipping that 0, right? What happens if I flip 0? N is 1 over 0. That's undefined, right? So think of 0 as 0 over 1. If I flip 0, that's undefined. So these are the places where undefined will occur. So again, 0, 180, or 360. Oh, sorry, this is a pi. This is in terms of radians. So we'll say 0, pi, or 2 pi. I think we need some more practice with that. So let's do 8, 10, and 12. See if those make sense for you. We'll go over that, and then we'll go to the quiz review that you guys picked up. Remember, cotangent and tangents, they're both involving sine over cosine or cosine over sine. And the reason that we're getting that 1 is if x and y are the same, right? If x and y are the same, then if I divide it, that's where I get that possibility of a 1. So what you guys get for number 8? 35 and you look at 135, you see how if I divide x and y, power of the 2, -√2 over √2 is -1, so that's consistent with that cotangent equal to -1.
would be like 315.
Yep, that's right. So we have two solutions here, 135 and 315. So on the quiz, there'll be problems like this where you gotta look for two solutions.
You have to look for the y value. X over y,
So what's the formula for cotangent?
X over y.
X over y. So the only time I'm gonna get x over y to be equal to -1 or 1 is if x and y are the same. Okay. So the only time they're the same is along the middle angles, right? Either because the only way I'm gonna get x and y to cancel out is that they're the same. So I know it's gonna be along the middle angles. It's gonna be 45, 135, 225, or 315. But I want a negative value, so it's gonna be 135 or 3.
Could it also be 225 because
So what's wrong with 225?
they're both negative. So
They're both negatives, so it'll be positive, which is gonna conflict with that. Okay, secant equals -√2. Secant is related to cosine. So we're looking to flip cosine to get √2. Now where's cosine or secant going to be negative? Quadrant 2 and 3. So I'm looking for the x value. Which x value in quadrant 2 and 3, if I flip the x value, I'm going to have a chance to get to √2. Yeah. Along that 3^4. Because I know if I flip 1/2, I'm not going to get √2. If I flip 2 over √3, I'm not going to get √2. But if I flip 2 over √2, there's a chance for me to get that √2. So if I rationalize it, that's going to allow me to get there. So it'll be, yeah, 5^4 and 3^4. Any questions with that? Okay. Cosine is positive. √3/2. That's the x value. So we know we're looking in the first and fourth quadrant. Where's cosine going to be √3/2? Yeah, quadrant 1 is 4. What are my angle measures in terms of radians? Yeah, pi/6 and another pi/6. Okay, let's skip the bottom part and let's go to a quiz review. I made two quiz review sheets. There's page 1, this is worksheet 1, and page 2 is worksheet 2. So your quiz will be very similar to be 1 page. I gave you 2 pages to give you additional practice. Okay, but the quiz is only going to be 1 page. Okay, so go ahead and start with A. Use your unit circle. So let's assume that tomorrow you filled out your unit circle on the back of your quiz and now you're using it. And what if something doesn't land inside your interval that you recognize?
At 360.
Yeah, add 360 or add or subtract 2 pi, right? You can always get to your interval that you recognize if you just move it or find a coterminal angle. Sorry. Okay, any questions for number one, A, B, and C? Yeah, part C. The part C, secant of -4 pi/3. I don't recognize -4 pi/3, so I'm going to add 2 pi to get to something that I feel more familiar. So -4/3 plus 2 is same thing as -4 plus 6/3. And so -4 plus 6 is 2. So 2 pi/3, that's in the second quadrant. Here's my ordered pair for 2 pi/3. It's -1/2 root 3/2. I know secant is related to my x value, related to my cosine. So if I flip that -1/2, I get -2. Does that make sense? Yes, question.
On this one, are we gonna the entire circle? Yeah, or we have a unit circle.
You don't have to fill out a unit circle, but you'll be given a blank unit circle to use if you like. So you're not gonna be able to bring in your unit circle on the quiz, but you don't have to fill out a unit circle if you don't. Because I'm not gonna grade this if you're happy with your grade or if you got 100. But my suggestion is, yes, do fill out the unit circle because that will help you on the quiz, but I'm not gonna grade it. Okay, number 2, go ahead and, you know that it's in the second quadrant, so, point P is in the second quadrant. Pythagorean theorem. Find the hypotenuse. And then find all 6 trig ratios. All right, any questions with number 2? Yeah. Guys, I will post the key for both worksheet 1 and 2 on my website under today's date. But I will send you a link to that if you're not having a hard time finding it.
Routes rate is -26 and -6, right, for cosine. I wrote -1 and 26 to my sort of negative, which makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yes. That means it has to be one of these four here. Cosecant is the y value, so it has to be something zero, something so one. All right, let's look at number 3. Everybody go with 2? Okay, number 3, it says state the quadrant. It says tangent is -1. Cosecant is related to sine, so I'm going to say sine is positive. Yes. So tangent is negative and sine is positive. And if I look at this one at a time here, tangent is negative. I can eliminate 2 choices here because tangent is negative. Can't be the first and fourth quadrant. Because those are positives for tangents. I can eliminate the ones that I know for sure does not meet the criteria. And then between second and fourth, where is sine going to be positive? Second, so I can eliminate the fourth quadrant, and I know that it's got to be quadrant 2. Now, if you look at your unit circle, tangent only has a chance of being a 1 or a -1 if numerically they're the same, right? So I know that's going to be involved with this -√2/2. So I know that's my order pair. So secant is related to the what? The x or the y?
Yes.
The x. Just have to do what with this? Flip it, right? If I flip -√2/2, I can rationalize the denominator.
How come this is in the second, I mean, the fourth quadrant, if cosine is positive? And this is.
Cosine related to the sine, yeah.
Yeah.
Not if it is something that's on the unit circle. So, so if you look at part C, it's not a unit circle value, so then you gotta draw a triangle. For this one here, because in the second quadrant, tangent is x over y. Where are the only x over y's that I can divide and get a 1 or a -1? If they're the same, right? That's the only chance that I can divide y over x and get a 1 is if 2 numbers cancel out. Okay, part B. Find cosine if cosecant of theta is undefined. So anything you see undefined, you got to think, all right, it's got to be involving 0, right? 0 is the issue. So here are the order pairs. It's got to be along the quadrant, right? So cosecant is undefined. That means the y value. The only place that y is potentially undefined is if I flip that 0. So I'm looking between these 2 options. And then I know that secant is negative. In other words, cosine is negative. My x is negative. So I know it has to be this order pair. This is a negative y axis. Sorry, negative x axis. So now that I know my order pair, what's cosine of theta here? -1. Okay, so I encourage you guys to continue working through this. as a way to review. And I do want to make a correction on the back of the worksheet. I copy and pasted and I didn't change the problem. So this is on worksheet 2. If you guys can change that, tangent of theta is negative root 3. Change that problem, otherwise we're doing the same problem. So I want to give you that extra practice. So 3D on the back, change it to tangent theta equals negative root 3. I will work out the key and I will post it on the website and I'll send you guys a link. I'm sorry. I'll put it on my website under today's dates. And I'll send you a link to remind.
I may be ready to find.